Hi, folks. David here, and welcome to week 3 of the Canadian Constitution. Now, what we're going to do this week is a series of YouTube videos where I will take you through the key provisions of the Constitution Act of 1867. So, what I want you to have in front of you is your copy of the Constitution Act of 1867. Just download it off of the Moodle site and print it off because I want you to have this in front of you as we go through, as I take you through the key provisions of the Constitution Act of 1867. But now, before we get into the Canadian Constitution, I want to read you something else. You will remember this probably. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That, of course, is the beginning of the American Declaration of Independence, one of the first key founding documents of the American Constitution. So no matter what you might think of what has become of America over the last 250 years, and maybe over the last 4 years or so, you have to admit, I think, that those words of the American Declaration of Independence are inspirational. They speak of popular democracy, human rights, rule by, of, and for the people. Those are inspirational. And those words inspired American revolutionaries to rebel against the British in 1776 and to wage a successful revolution. Those words went on to inspire French revolutionaries 20 years later in Paris. They went on to inspire British liberals in the 1830s, 1840s, pushing for responsible government in Britain and then elsewhere, like in the colonies of Canada. They went on to inspire Black Americans in the 1940s, 1950s, the civil rights movement led by Martin Luther King. Remember, Martin Luther King said he had a dream. He had a dream that America would stand up and live out the true principles of its founding constitution, that all men, all women are created equal. So I just begin with this because a constitution and a constitutional document can have universal and timeless importance. And a constitutional document can speak to fundamental truths, moral principles, concepts of the human condition and human aspiration. The Declaration of Independence to Americans is a holy document. Kids memorize it in school. And it has a symbolic importance. It speaks to to Americans, it speaks to why America exists, why it's important for America to exist, why America must exist. It's a declaration of purpose. So constitutional documents can have enormous power and can move people. So now I've asked you to read the Constitution Act of 1867. I've asked you to do something most Canadians never do. Most Canadians never read this document, and it's no wonder. The Constitution Act is not taught in high schools. And again, no wonder, because if you have looked at it and do look at it and read it, it's nothing like the American Declaration of Independence. The Constitution Act of 1867 is a dull, dry, boring, legalistic document, but it does stand as the primary constitutional document founding Canada in 1867, and this is still constitutional law today. So I just want to take you through, I just want to begin a few minutes on the very preamble of the constitutional document, Constitution Act 1867. Note that, as Russell says, this was originally known as the British North America Act of 1867. The name was changed only in 1982 with the Constitutional Amendment of 1982 to rename it the Constitution Act of 1867. But in writings, and if you may hear me referring to it as the British North America Act or the BNA Act, and it's the same document. So look at the very beginning, the preamble, page 1. An act for the Union of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, and the government thereof, and for purposes connected therewith, written by a lawyer, John A. Macdonald. And the Canadian Constitution begins, I love it, it begins, whereas, it's a legal document, whereas the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion under the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, with a constitution similar in principle to that of the United Kingdom. And whereas such a union would conduce to the welfare of the provinces and promote the interests of the British Empire. And it carries on. Hardly a revolutionary document. But what we do get here, we do get certain values here. There's to be a federal union. This document is creating a federal union of provincial governments under the British Crown. It will be a constitution similar in principle to that found in the United Kingdom. Then you could hear and see John A. Macdonald's work. And it will promote the interests of the provinces and the British Empire. That is written in. Canada, the purpose of Canada was to promote the interests of the British Empire. And this is still constitutional law today. This has not been amended. So we see a concern here. What are the values coming through for the Fathers of Confederation? A concern for federalism and imperialism, and a fidelity to the United Kingdom, things British, and to the British Crown. What we do see as you go through the document, you see that the document is largely continuing existing powers, creating a federal distribution of powers, a federal government, but a federal system, but where the federal central government is the key defining, empowering government, the key superior government over the provinces. And that there's a continuation of powers and a strong central government. So as we'll go through more videos over this week, and I'll take you through the key provisions of the Constitution Act of 1867. And although there are over 140 some odd sections, we'll end up only looking at 20, 30 of the key ones. So I'll be coming back your way again shortly.